Good morning. Welcome to today's episode on Hooked on Mortgages. I have a special guest today, Jon. How are we doing, Jon? Thank you for
Good.
coming.
Morning. Thanks for inviting me.
Before we get started, why don't you go ahead and give a little introduction, just where you work and everything that you do right now.
Sure. I am a residential realtor with Coldwell Banker. Been doing it for 15 years. Once I graduated from FIU, got into the business. I grew up in the business. My parents used to practice together. And at the same time as I graduated, my dad passed away. And that's kind of like where I hit a crossroads in my life and just had to figure out what I wanted to do. So I got into the business and been doing it ever since. So
Okay. And you're from Miami, you said,
from
right?
Miami, born and raised here.
All right.
Yes.
You- High school?
Killian High School, class of '02.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously we went to Columbus, both Renee and I. So obviously, I know we played you in baseball a decent amount of time. Did you play sports in high school?
No, I did not. I'm not very athletic. I'm competitive, but I'm not athletic.
Hey, it's competitive in sports, competitive in business.
Right.
That's all the same.
Right.
All that matters. So you were saying, you hit a crossroads, decided to go into real estate. You've been in real estate. Was there another path that you were looking at before, other than real estate, or what was kind of your option?
Yeah, it's a good question. I got my degree, my bachelor's in finance. I graduated '07. I took some time, didn't know what I wanted to do, and then I went back to school. Not athletic, but competitive, and I'm a sports fan, right? So I figure, let me get back into school, get my master's in sport management, and that's what I did. And I graduated with my master's degree in sport management. I actually got a job with the Miami Heat.
Okay.
Inside sales. It's kind of like an entry-level position.
Okay.
And then at that same time, I had a grad assistantship with the FIU basketball team when Isaiah Thomas was the coach there.
Nice.
So I traveled with the team, helped set up the travel itinerary and everything, and even helped like break down the film too of like the schools that we were playing, right? And then again, graduated, and around the same time, my dad got sick. And I was like 25 also at the time. My dad got sick, passed away. I graduate. It really didn't lead to anything other than like the short-term job with the Heat. And I'm like, what am I going to do, right? Like, pursue this that's going to lead me to the unknown, and the pay, it's so competitive and the pay is very minimal, right? Or get into something that I'm already familiar with because I grew up with it and I had my license already at the time, and just hit the ground running like that. And also help out my mom too, because it was my mom and my dad working together. And I decided the latter. And for a short period of time, it was my mom and I working together. So I kind of had a mentor without knowing I had a mentor, and without knowing that this was something that I was going to be doing 15 years later and continue to do it. And now it's me and my wife. My mom is retired. She's been retired for about 5 or 6 years, and it's my wife and I now running the family legacy, let's say, in business under a corporate brokerage like Coldwell Banker Realty, which is worldwide.
Well, I'd assume too that inside sales probably helped you a little bit in regards to, because I was in the same position. I did some inside sales, a lot of cold calling, kind of get you past the fear of getting rejected, which is number one part of the business. So
it did. And the one thing that sticks out to me during that time was, I was doing a little bit of real estate before getting into the job with the Miami Heat because I was helping out my mom and my dad, right? And I remember the interview that the manager for the sales for the Miami Heat is a great guy, probably one of the best bosses I've ever had, the best boss I've ever had. During the interview, he asked me, like, how do you handle all the no's, right? And I was like, at that time, I wasn't really doing real estate. I wasn't making the calls and knocking on the doors and doing what I'm doing now. And it kind of clicked. Like, that is what I'm supposed to do. Then I get the job, and they give you this lead list of a bunch of names that have gone to Heat games or a bunch of companies, and you got to call them and try and sell them seats, right? And it's a numbers game, right? The more people, and they expect you to make 50 phone calls, at least back then. I don't know how it is now, but they expect you to make 50 phone calls a day, and they log because the phone that you're using.
all the same way.
Yeah, right. So they log it. They see how many calls you've made, and then some people would like cut corners and they call fax machines because it logs, So, but yeah, you just kind of get into it, and then you start to realize, and then boom, I leave that, I get into real estate, and you start to realize that you got to meet people, and it's a numbers game. You're going to knock on doors, call for sale by owners, call expired listings, and eventually you're going to hit it off with somebody that is interested. and it'll turn into business. And instead of selling $2,000 of partial plans for the Miami Heat and getting whatever percentage of that, you're selling a property, a house, and you know, a few $100,000. So
yeah, I mean, I was the same way. I mean, for me, I did staffing for physicians, and it was $100 a day. So believe me, it was I know that game. So obviously, you got into the real estate. Just kind of beginning. It sounds like you had a pretty decent introduction. Did you have any real challenges in the beginning, starting off? Or I know you said you hit the ground running, but what was, I guess, the biggest thing that you?
No, I mean, I got into it. If you look at the timeline, I got into it in 2010.
Okay, so right after the crash.
Right after the crash, everything was rock bottom, basically. The crash started, what, '08, let's say? Yeah, '08, and then 2010, things were rock bottom, and that was the biggest challenge, was people were still underwater. A lot of people were underwater on their mortgages, and I remember I would go knocking on doors around that time, and I remember one lady opening the door and being like, no, why the hell would I want to be selling? Like, where am I going to go? Like, do you understand how much my property's worth today? I'm like, sorry. Just walk away. So yeah, but we were fortunate during that time because we were able to get foreclosed assets from Chase. They would assign it to our broker at Coldwell Banker, and I was one of the 2 realtors in our office that was handling those assets and selling them. So that's what kept me afloat during that period, that time frame. And then fast forward 3 or 4 years later, you know, the market continues to pick up, and now people are no longer underwater and they have equity back on their property, or they're a little bit above break even, and they can confidently make a move into something larger or something smaller, you know. So that's how it worked out.
I know we started in about 2015, was it 2015? Yeah, I mean, also rates were obviously a little bit better back then too.
Right.
So other than what they are now, but I guess leading currently into the market, you know, what do you foresee for these next 12 months coming up, starting in 2025 that we have with this real estate market?
With the market, I think we're already seeing a little bit of a newer trend, especially in the condo market. At least in South Florida and Miami, condos are dropping.
Yeah.
In price. Could be good opportunities now for investors that know what they're getting into. They're dropping, you probably know, because the HOAs are going up, insurances for the buildings are going up, assessments, all these new regulations that have been put in place due to Surfside. So it's causing the prices to come down. Single family houses, I still see they're strong because they don't have the same type of inventory that condos do at the moment. So I still think single family houses, especially if they're in good areas, you know, like the Coral Gables, the Coconut Groves, the South Miamis, those are still selling fast and strong. Single family homes that are updated where you don't have to do much, they still sell fast and at higher prices. But if you get into, like, say, areas that are not so heavily in demand, start to see it level off a little bit depending on what you're offering, what the seller's offering for sale.
Yeah, I mean, because we're starting to see it a lot now, especially with interest rates being where they are.
Yeah.
You know, high 6s, low 7s. People are still currently skittish in regards to just hearing that number, even though we're still lower than. I mean, I think 2000. What were the rates looking like at 2008? I mean, because I know they shot up. Oh no, they were a little bit higher in that time, right after the crash, or right before the crash, correct? Or
before the crash?
I mean, I think they were
like in the 5s before the crash, like 05, 06, 04. They were like in the 5s because even I got caught up and bought something, and I remember my rate at the time was like 5.25 or something like that, right? If I remember correctly. And then I'm not quite sure when it kind of went up, but I know it went up a little bit, kind of maybe similar to what it is now. And
yeah, the adjustable rates is what hit everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just that, but a lot more too.
Oh yeah, no. Right. The artificial.
Exactly.
You know,
the income, man. Yeah.
No income.
No income. Yeah. The balloon mortgages, all that.
Yeah. Watching what was that movie? The Big Short was a real.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Yeah. But just, you know, kind of obviously going off of what today's market looks like, you know, what's your advice to someone, you know, maybe a first time buyer that's you know, looking to purchase, maybe renting a property, you know, what would be your piece of advice, or how do you consult your clients that are you know, interested in buying or not ready, maybe on the fence about making that move forward?
I think when it comes to real estate, and buying for yourself, it depends on your personal situation, right? And if you have a need to move, right? For instance, you're in a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm telling you because I just had this case, right, with a buyer that they have 3 kids and the apartment was maybe 1,200 square feet. They needed more space. They just needed more space, right? You move. You find something to buy because this is your personal situation. You guys are no longer comfortable in your current setting. So you move because you're not buying as for an investment per se, right? You're buying somewhere where you can see yourself living for the next at least 5 years, unless something unforeseen happens and you have to move before that. And if that's the case and you're buying to stay in your new home for the next 5 years and longer, ideally, then don't hold yourself back. Don't reserve yourself thinking you're going to wait for a better opportunity because that better opportunity may not come. And you're probably already on Zillow looking because you're curious, right? And then you see homes that maybe match a lot of what you mentally have in mind and what your vision is. So why pass up if you're qualified, you have money saved up, you've already maybe possibly spoken to a lender? That's always my advice. And the same goes for the opposite. If you're thinking of selling, there's a reason to be selling, right? If you're thinking of buying or selling because of market conditions, then your level of motivation, your personal situation, isn't at like its highest for you to be ready. You get what I'm saying? Because people, for instance, when the rates were at 3.5, there's still many people that didn't buy.
Yeah.
You know, so it really just depends on the person and the family's personal situation that makes them ready to buy.
It sounds like the inside sales kicking in there from the phone calls, because I mean that's kind of how I learned when I was doing it. It was, you kind of just pitch it and then you listen to what people say to you.
Wow.
And if you just let them kind of talk and they kind of tell you their situation,
right?
Which, whether they should buy, whether they should sell, and they kind of either talk themselves into it or they talk themselves out of it.
Right.
But I mean, kind of going into you were talking about a family that you just helped that moved from a condo to a single family, being in the business for 15 years. We always like to ask, is there any individual story that kind of sticks in your mind that you're really proud of, or one that you'll always remember as a transaction? I know every closing is a good closing, but there's a lot of times there's some that are kind of just leave you speechless, or you're proud of.
There's not one case in particular, because when you do help a family move, buy, or even sell, a lot of them are very appreciative, right? Like I've had an elder lady that I helped move out of her house that she was in for 30 plus years. And she's not the only one, right? Like where she moved and she went to St. Augustine because her daughters had slowly been moving up north to North Florida. So she moved and she cried out of gratitude for me helping her, being the one to help her sell her house, right? And other people have given me similar appreciation with helping. It's a big decision, right? Especially if it's somebody that's been in this house and they have all these memories and they've been there for 30 plus years or 20 plus years and it's finally time to move. So you kind of see the gratitude that they have, and it makes it rewarding. Your job, right? Like, a lot of people say that realtors don't do anything. And I'll tell you, Matt, that there are times where, I'll tell you this one case, right? I helped a family sell their house in Miami and they moved to North Carolina, and they were happy, but nothing like, oh my God, John, thank you so much. It was more like a transactional deal. I did a good job. Everything was smooth, right? And I asked them for a review. I think they never gave it to me. They never sent it, and I never followed up. They moved to North Carolina. 3 years later, for whatever reason, I guess they had to sell their house in North Carolina that they purchased. The wife reached out to me. Her name was Christina. She reached out to me and she's like, John, I know you asked for a review before. We just sold our house in North Carolina and it was the biggest headache that we've ever had to deal with. I just want to leave you a review, because now she sees, right? When something goes smooth and like you think it's easy, like you don't see what's going on behind the scenes when you're the customer, when you're the client, right? Like the buyer or the seller. But when it's smooth and easy, a lot of it has to do with the team that's involved, the realtor, the realtors on both sides, the lender, the title company, and so forth. And then I guess she saw it because of her second experience, which was a bad experience. And she sent me a full, like, 2-paragraph review, just kind of sharing her gratitude 3 years later.
There you go. Yeah. No, I've had. I mean, obviously, we've had our fair share. The one that I always remember is actually had. I think she was an immigrant, came over. She'd been a maid for I don't know for how many years, and her son was pushing her to buy, and it was kind of the same situation. You know, I got her qualified, and it was a difficult transaction to say the least, and you know, kind of the same thing. I got the clear to close, and you know, she thought I was calling to ask her for another set of documentation that the underwriter was requesting, and broke down in tears. And you know, it's one of those that it makes you feel it's a nightmare. You might lose sleep over it during the transaction, but once it happens, it's always a good thing. And I mean, again, too, I always, you know, we've had our fair share as well. You know, obviously, that was a good transaction. Have you ever had an experience, you know, like a hilarious experience, or just like some crazy situation happen in real estate? I feel like Miami is there's always something that always hits. I always tell the story. I had a client that bought an engagement ring 2 days before closing, and ended up as a nightmare. It's always one that I'll remember. So we've had a couple good ones on the podcast. So just seeing if you had any that your people are just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, a couple, right? Like during the foreclosure days.
Okay.
There was squatting was a big issue. And we've had encounters where we go to the house and all of a sudden there's like squatters inside, and they would fraudulently have a lease, right?
Yeah.
You knock on the door and you're like, who are you? Like, what are you doing here? Oh, the owner rented it to me, right? And they're like, just coincidentally, like just they just happen to have the lease with them, right?
Yeah.
If you're like a real tenant, you lose the lease like
it's
hours after. Yeah. It's in your email, or you just lose it. But they happen to have a paper copy, like right there with them. Look, he just rented it to me, right? And that was one time, like in a property that we were getting ready to put on the market. I put lockbox on it, and I went by for whatever reason to check up on it, or I think I don't remember what it was, but I noticed that the lockbox was missing. And I walk in, and there's a couple of chairs, kind of like these, just sitting there, like in the living room. And I'm like, damn, there's a squatter that's coming in and out. So call the owner. I tell him, this was a short sale. I tell him what's going on. And around that same time, I go to Home Depot, get new locks to rechange them again. And around that same time, these supposed tenants come, and they're like, what are you doing to my house? I'm like, what are you doing? And, the house was rented to me. I'm like, no, it wasn't. Oh, by Richard such and such. I'm like, yeah, anyone can go on miamidade.gov, property search, and find the owner's name, right? So he was like, I'm gonna call the police. You can't just kick me out of my own house. I'm like, well, call the police, because that's what I was planning to do, right? So the police came, and they told him, like, within the next 2 hours, you got to get like the little bit of furniture that was inside. So I caught them like right on time, because if they weren't able to get themselves situated and in, I think the laws around that time were a little iffy, or like
a little more lenient.
A little bit more lenient to the squatters, right. But yeah, those were crazy times. Another house where it was a tenant that was practicing Santeria. Yeah. So you had like blood all over.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It was funny, actually. Speaking of, I had an investment property where I mean, it was legitimately rented. And I was at the time trying to sell it as well. And you know, when I would do showings, they had, you know, they were santeros, and they had a bunch of like the candles and the saint pictures and the books. And obviously in Miami, a lot of the buyers are, you know, Hispanic, and they saw it, and it was kind of it was a rough sell. Ended up getting it sold, but you know, a lot of people got turned away because it, you know, kind of scared them as being buyers. But you know, kind of just going into the trend. Obviously, you know, you gave your opinion for these next 12 months. You know, do you see anything you know, in the next 3 to 5 years, especially for potential buyers, happening in the market? Obviously, we've seen a lot of appreciation. You know, since you and I have been in the business, do you see it kind of trending in the same direction, going down? a lot higher, like we saw in the COVID times, or kind of what's your opinion on that?
I think you'll see some gradual appreciation on single family homes, like I kind of said earlier. Condos are trending down depending on price range. A lot of people are looking for newer condos these days if they have the means to afford it. But condos in general are trending down. But how much longer it's going to last for? I mean, HOAs can't continue to go up either,
Yeah.
right? Forever, like year over year over year, continue to go up the way at the percentage that they've been going up over the last 3 years. It's got to come to a certain point where, okay, we're collecting enough funds, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's going to happen within the next year, maybe two.
Yeah, I think we'll see. Again, there's a lot of those condos that, I mean, there's just a lot of crooks that were dealing with those. I think they're making up the deficit. The unfortunate part is it's cutting the corners on insurances, which we're starting to see a lot of problems with now. But I'm hoping, and like you said, I think the next couple of years, once they're out of their hole, it'll be a better situation.
Right. And then that might bring more consumer confidence, may make it, you could tell me, may make it easier as far as requirements for qualifying for a loan for a condo. Because maybe by then, these condos are now required to carry reserves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these buildings, as a lender, you wouldn't be able to qualify these buyers unless they're putting 25% down because these condos don't carry enough reserves. So that could change the market too. So now a first-time home buyer in 2 or 3 years, when they're getting qualified and they have 5% or 10% down, and you do some diligence on the building and you see that there's reserves, now they can buy compared to today or last year, right? Yep. So for first-time home buyers, where they're only looking at townhomes or homes starting in the $500,000 or $600,000 or $800,000, depending on where you're looking, now you can first-time home buy a condo at $300,000 and have 5% down. So it would open the doors for buyers that don't have the means to purchase at a higher bracket, let's say. Right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, condos are always tricky. It's there are a couple programs if they don't have the reserves where we're able to do it with 10% down. But like I was saying, the main issue now is they're trying to make their money back on the HOA, and then they're cutting the costs or cutting the corner on the insurances, which has been causing some difficulties. So we have to take the file to different programs, and again, it is 10, 15, 20% down, just depending upon the specific bank and the kind of purchase. But I think that is a market that hopefully can get tapped into a little bit simpler for first time buyers, because they're obviously Brickell everywhere is building up. You can build up a lot. You just can't build on the ground. Right. There's only so many single family homes that we can put.
We're limited down here with land in South Florida.
No, I mean, again, too, the other thing is once rates do come down, which I do believe that they're ticking down a little bit. So I think the next couple months we'll see them come down again. Dropping a point, 2 points.
Oh, that's big. That would be big.
With that HOA tacked on it, hopefully it'll kind of even out to what a single family is. Because I know I've seen a couple that are $600-700. The HOA is at $600-700 a month, and it definitely hurts the qualifying process.
Yeah.
The one of the things too is I like to ask is in regards for obviously AI is a big thing coming on right now. In regards to technology is always evolving. Do you see AI making any significant changes in the real estate market, or do you think the best case is just to use it as a tool?
I think it would help the market, technology, marketing wise. It'll help people in the business. I use it already, right?
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. But I don't think it's going to sell a house, right?
Yeah.
If you're a buyer or a seller, like you're not gonna use AI. Like I think you're always gonna need that middle person, that unbiased opinion, and that person that can walk and figuratively, let's say, hold hands between the buyer and the seller from beginning to the end, to the closing table. And AI, and I mean, you can even have like one of these robots, like it's still not the same.
No,
like you need that personal touch, right? That empathy, that understanding of your situation. So we'll always have jobs, right? The same way, like if you can compare it to having an auto dealership, you'll always have car salesmen will, I think, in my opinion, will always exist either. And we're talking about cars, right? Like you can essentially buy a car online these days, and a lot of people do, but you still got to go in. So that's a car, something you drive from point A to point B, let alone a house where it's a decision that you're making with your family and you're going to live here and possibly your forever home, right? Like you need somebody that can give you an unbiased opinion and can assist you and walk you through from beginning to end. I think that'll always be.
Yeah, I always take this saying from the Italian Job, the movie.
Yeah.
I always say people are always fine when it comes to buying a home. They're freaked out, immature, neurotic, and emotional. So I do agree. I think the personal touch is people want to talk to a person. They want to talk to a robot. They want to be able to reach out and handholds, even good news, bad news.
Right.
I think you'd rather deal with a person.
Right.
It's kind of like how many times have you called a support number? You've hit 700 times.
People are representative.
People are representative. Exactly. So I definitely think that's a main thing too. I think it'll be used as a major tool for us in the future. But again, I agree with you on that. There's always a personal touch that needs to be involved in at least a transaction like this.
Right.
One last thing, just in regards for, I guess something, a piece of advice, I guess, what's the best piece of advice that you've received as a realtor? And how do you think that it's shaped your career? Obviously you've been doing this for 15 years. So, is there anything that, that was told to you that's stuck to this day?
Yeah, a couple things. One was from like the regional manager of Coldwell Banker. Went to one of these meetings, and the one thing that she said is that the realtor on the other side should be your friend, right? Because at the end of the day, you guys are working towards the same goal, and your own respective clients are also working towards the same goal. You have a buyer that wants to buy that house, and the seller that wants to sell that house. So if you can get on the same page, it makes the transaction much easier. So I always take that into consideration when I'm working a deal with another agent, right? There is negotiating involved, but at the same time, once that's done, it's like, okay, we worked out an agreement, right? Like both people met in the middle. It's like how I see like the form of a handshake.
Yeah.
It's not like you coming over here to shake my hand. We're meeting in the middle and shaking hands, right? And now from there, we're working together to get to the closing, right? So that's one thing that I always keep in mind when it comes to assisting and representing clients with buying or selling. And then the other thing too is the most important thing that it takes to closing a deal is a buyer that really wants to buy that house and the seller that really wants to sell that house. When you have that chemistry, the only way a deal doesn't happen is if you screw it up as an agent, right? Mm-hmm. So again, it's not an easy job, and you got to go out and meet people and be face to face and make the contacts and go through all the no's to get that yes. But it takes experience, and if you go by those two things, it kind of helps the whole nature of a transaction take place.
That's a great advice. Yeah, I don't know how many times I've had, you work with somebody and it's like you're going to war.
Yeah, they become like adversarial, and it's like, what are we doing right now? Like,
agreed. No, I mean, I think that's it. Is there anything else that you want to add, or any other topics that you wanted to touch on?
No, I mean, there was something I was thinking about, but it slipped my mind as I was explaining answering your last question.
Again, one last thing before we go. Actually, I always ask everybody this. Obviously in a Miami thing, you're from Miami. After lunch, you have your cafecito. I feel like there's a war in Miami between you have people that are for croquetas or empanadas. What's your choice on that one?
I do empanadas. My wife is Spanish, and if you've ever been to Spain, the croquetas are different.
Yeah, they are.
And she makes bomb croquetas.
Okay.
So like I no longer eat the croquetas here.
Fair enough.
Unless they're like from Buya. Buya has good croquetas,
they're good.
For the most part, I'm more of an empanada person.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I appreciate you coming on. It was great having you.
Thanks for having me, man.
Other than that, stay tuned to the next episode, and thank you for watching. Have a good one.